Hi guys, it's Grace with Grace Gets Gastric, and I am here today for my third quarter 2019 book review / roundup. So if you've watched my previous book reviews that I've done this year, every 3 months, I like to kind of do a quick wrap up of some of my favorites, some of the books I thought were decent, and then some of the books that I didn't like so much. So if you're interested in that, go ahead and keep watching. So you know, of course, if you've been around for a while, you know that I really enjoy reading. It's one of the big interests in my life. So in the past 3 months, so that would be July, August, and September, I read 132 books, which brings my total for the year to 294. So yes, that is a lot of books, I know. I do read a lot of kind of romance novels, which I'm not going to include in here because they're sort of a dime a dozen, but I find that a really nice way for me to compress, and I can generally read one of those in a few hours. Also a number of books that are, I'd say, kind of novella length, so they definitely still count, but they are significantly shorter than regular books. And then I also listen to a lot of audiobooks. I listen to them on almost double speed, generally speaking, so I get through them much faster. And that is what I do when I am driving, when I am working out, when I am going on walks, when I'm in the shower, when I'm cleaning my house. So I pretty much always have an audiobook on, and so a number of these are audiobooks, and so again, that really helps boost the number of books I read. So to get started, I will talk about some of my absolute favorite books that I read in the past 3 months. One thing you might notice a theme. I read a lot of books. I like to read books that sort of are from the point of view or that talk about the experiences of marginalized groups, in particular people of color and members of the queer community. I like to support authors in that space, and I like to kind of expand my knowledge. I also read a lot of books on feminism. I only think I talk about maybe 1 or 2 in here, but that is another thing that is important to me. So the first book is In Other Lands by Sarah Reese Brennan. And this is a YA fantasy book with a bisexual main character, Elliot. And I honestly, I just loved this book so much. It's sort of got some Harry Potter vibes, but as if the whole series took place in one book. So it's very fast paced. It takes place over, I think, about 4 years of this character being in magical school. And it's really funny. It pokes very lighthearted, respectful fun at some of like Harry Potter, those really popular tropes, or really popular series. I'm in love with Elliot, the main character, like just gave me so many feels. All of the characters are really fantastic. It was such a quick read. It was one of those ones I just could not put down. And it was just a lot of fun, and it really did. As a huge fan of the Harry Potter books, it definitely kind of gave me some nostalgic vibes. So definitely recommend that one. The next set of books, it's a series. It is the Parasol Protectorate by Gail Carriger. I'm not sure how she pronounces it. I have read basically everything by this author, she's just fantastic. But if you're going to read stuff from her, and I recommend everything, I would start with this series because this is it's a sort of historical steampunk supernatural romance series. So it's so much fun. It's really very humorous. If you like this historical steampunk, I'm sure you'd really enjoy this. It's got vampires and werewolves and all sorts of really fun shenanigans. And this author writes, she does a lot of different series, but they kind of all spin off of the same universe. So they're all understandable on their own, but they're more enjoyable if you read them after, in a certain order. So this is kind of the main series, her first series. So I definitely recommend starting with this. I listened to it on audio, and the narrator's fantastic. And then I'm listening to the spin-off series, the final book in her, the spin-off series, from a character that's in this book that you will meet towards the end. And I'm listening to that on Audible or audiobook as well, and it's also excellent. So just a lot of really lighthearted fun. It's like a perfect kind of, in my opinion, summer read, which is what I read it pretty much over the summer. But honestly, it's a great read for any time. The next book is a little bit more serious, and it is called White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo. And I think that this should be required reading for all white people. It is a nonfiction book, obviously, and it really talks a lot about racism in particular, like Western society, United States is a huge focus, and how, sorry, this is caught on something, okay. And just basically how white people can be better about understanding kind of what racism is, and that it is not just kind of the thing that it's turned into, where it's turned into this thing that nobody wants to be identified as. Obviously, you don't want to be identified as a racist, but racism is so much more than just outright hatred of Black people. It is, our whole country was built on racism. It is a systematic issue, and every white person, no matter how progressive you are, has been indoctrinated into our society and has these racist tendencies that you don't necessarily realize. And because it has become such a polarizing, if you're racist, you're bad, it has made white people, I think, less willing to acknowledge when they are doing or perpetuating racist stereotypes. And it's something that as a society we cannot overcome it if we refuse to acknowledge that we are participating in racist systems. So I just thought it was really well written, very clear, and very important. So I definitely recommend giving that a read. The next one is another nonfiction type book, and it is called I Feel Bad About My Neck by Nora Ephron. So you might know her. She wrote like Sleepless in Seattle. She wrote a lot of books. And this is a collection of sort of essays about womanhood and aging, which I thought was really funny, really insightful, really interesting, really moving. I would definitely recommend it to everyone, all women, particularly if you're an older woman. I want to recommend it for my parents, but I'm worried that my mom would be offended about me calling her old. But I just think it was really interesting, and it's something that we don't talk about enough, aging in general, and particularly what aging means as a woman. When you are told as a gender that you lose your value when you are no longer young and attractive, or if you are never attractive. And I mean, and that's something as members of the weight loss community, I know that I certainly had struggles with fatness and femininity. And so I think aging and femininity is another really interesting topic, and I really thought it was very humorous but very relatable at the same time. The next book, it's another series, and it is the Nightrunner series by Lynn Flewelling. I've only read the first 5 books. It's a 7-book series, so I've got the next 2 books on hold at the library. And this is a high fantasy series, and another one with bisexual main characters. So it is really, really, I love fantasy books. This is very high fantasy, really intricate, engaging plots, very wonderful and fully fleshed out characters. There is eventually a romance that builds over a few books between the 2 main male characters. There's off-screen sex between various genders in this universe. There is no issue with same-sex couples, so there's not any homophobia. And it's not an explicit series, so there are sex scenes between both heterosexual and homosexual characters, but it's all fade to black, so there's nothing explicit. But while I very much enjoyed the romantic aspect as well, I mean, really, it's just super engaging fantasy, and I love high fantasy books. And it's been a while since I found a significant series, a longer series that I could really sink into. So the fact that this was 7 books really caught my attention, because I love being able to just really lose myself in a world. And they're really, really well written and just very engaging. So recommend those. So next is Howl's Moving Castle by Diana Wynne Jones. So this is actually a 3-book series. I've listened/read to the first 2 books. And it's a series where each book focuses on different main characters, but characters from the previous books kind of make their appearance throughout. So you could read them out of order, but I definitely suggest reading them in order. And it is a YA, actually probably more like a middle grade fantasy book. I can totally see how I would have loved this as a kid. I mean, and I loved it now, but this is definitely something if you have children, younger children, this would be a great book to read with them, read to them, or for them to just read on their own if they enjoy reading. It was just really fun. For the first book, it's a girl who gets cursed to be an old woman and has to figure out how to overcome it, and just her voice as like an old woman and how she just embraces it is so humorous. There were a number of times where I laughed out loud, and it was just like charming. It was just like a charming, delightful read. It was super quick, and it definitely gave me kind of nostalgic feels because I've always loved reading, and it had a vibe to a lot of books I read when I was younger, that just made me really, I don't know, yeah, feel nostalgic. So I really liked it. Next we have On the Come Up by Angie Thomas. So last round I recommended her book The Hate You Give, which is an excellent book. And then so that was her first book. This is her second book. And I was really kind of wondering how it would go because The Hate You Give was so phenomenal. And I was like, how are you going to follow up on that? But she totally nails it. This one was excellent. It kind of takes place in the same universe as The Hate You Give, but doesn't bring up any of those characters or anything. And it was definitely different. It had different characters and they were very distinct, but it still has kind of the same overall themes of exploring race and racism and Blackness in America, particularly for the younger generation, but also, obviously they have parents and they have families. So I just thought it was really, really well written. The way that the author kind of integrates these issues just feels so real and natural and effortless. It doesn't feel forced or like they're really trying to make a point so much that they lose sight of making it make sense within the narrative, which I've read a few times in other books. So just really excellent book. And then the final book in my great category is the Murder Bot Diaries. So it's a 4-book novella series by Martha Wells. And this is actually a sci-fi series. I really enjoy fantasy and sci-fi, if you can't tell, but I've been more on a fantasy kick as of late, and I haven't really read a lot of sci-fi in a few years, I would say. So this is the first sci-fi I've really read in a while, and it was so engaging and charming that it really reminded me how much I love sci-fi. And the whole premise is it's from the point of view of a robot who is a security robot artificial intelligence, and just their because they're, essentially genderless, but their interpretations of the world and trying to understand how humans work. It was just really a great POV. It was just really interesting, very kind of antisocial, just wants to watch their soaps. And the world building was really excellent. I mean, like I said, these aren't full novels, they're novellas. And the fact that the author really manages to flesh out the world and kind of drop you right in the middle of the action without ever making you feel lost or confused was really impressive. Because that, in my opinion, is a big drawback to a lot of sci-fi, is that it can be a little just hard to connect with and understand. It gets a little too technical or they don't explain enough. And I just find that it's hard for authors, in my opinion, to really build out worlds well in sci-fi. So this was excellent. And because they were novellas, it was really like quick little reads. So that was the good books, or the great books, and now we'll get to the good books. So these are books that I still really, really enjoyed, would definitely recommend, but were maybe not absolute 5-star favorites for me. And the first was The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. So I try to read every quarter at least one hard copy book that I have not yet read. So I have a shelf of books that I've been given throughout the years. I've picked up at at the bookstore that I just never got around to reading. So I'm trying to slowly but surely work my way through those. And so this was one of them. I got it from a friend for my birthday in a box of books a couple of years ago. And it takes place during World War II in France. And it was really interesting. It was really well written. It took a while for me to really get into it, but by the end I was very engaged and definitely tearing up. I've read so many books on World War II and I love them, but it's one of those things where it becomes hard, I think, sometimes for books to really stand out in that genre because there are so many standout books. So I would say it was good, but I definitely read much better books. The Book Thief, All the Light You Cannot See, just to name a couple I've read recently. So it was good. I'd recommend it, but I wouldn't necessarily go out of my way to read it. The next is The Shipping News by Annie Proulx. I don't know how to pronounce her last name, but it is one of the Pulitzer Prize winners last, I don't know, 20 years or something. You might know if you've been watching these series that I am doing a challenge where I'm trying to read all the Pulitzer Prize winners, so this was obviously on the list. I kind of mixed feelings on it. I personally just didn't like the writing style all that much. It was a very distinct and different kind of writing style that, for me, just kind of kept throwing me out of the narrative, and I can see how some people would really enjoy it. The setting of the Newfoundland area was really beautifully captured. It was a really kind of interesting read. It wasn't my absolute favorite, but it was one of the best of the recent Pulitzer Prize winners I've read. I'll be honest, I've had a couple of duds lately. So I enjoyed it, but it didn't completely wow me. The next one is You Can't Touch My Hair by Phoebe Robinson. I listened to this on audiobook and I really liked it. It is another book. So Phoebe Robinson, she does the podcast Two Dope Queens. I don't know if you have listened to it, but this is really a series of kind of really funny, humorous essays on particularly Blackness in the United States, in particular in relation to, her experience, so Black womanhood. And I thought it was really funny, really interesting, engaging. There were quite a lot of pop culture type references that I can see some people not really enjoying too much. I thought it was a little bit of overkill, but overall, I thought it was really interesting. I thought it was really accessible. And again, another great book on kind of touching on some issues of racism and race in the US in particular. So I thought it was really interesting and worth a read. And I really did think the audiobook was the way to go because she reads it and it's always nice to hear authors read it in their own voice. And then the last book on this particular list, on the good list, is All the Single Ladies by Rebecca Traister. So this is a book on being single in the United States, particularly single womanhood, kind of feminism, and talking about what it means to be a kind of single person, a single woman in this day and age. So I thought it was really interesting. As a single woman, there were definitely some things that I was like, a little bit preaching to the choir. But I think that it would be, I think it's a really interesting read or listen. And I think listening is probably the way to go. It's fairly academic, so it can be a little bit dry, but I listened to it and I think that helped take away some of the dryness. And yeah, I do think that perhaps people who are not single and can't really relate to what that means could benefit from giving this a read. And then finally, the last category are the bad books. So the books that I didn't particularly enjoy. There are only a couple. Most books I tend to enjoy to some degree, but these ones I was just really not a fan of. So the first is Seriously, I'm Kidding by Ellen DeGeneres, which made me really sad to not enjoy because I love Ellen DeGeneres. I really love her. But this book was just kind of a hot mess. I probably would not have finished it if I wasn't audiobook and 4 hours long, so it was super quick. It was just really disjointed. It didn't seem to have any kind of central theme, nothing that was tying it together. There was just no point, and it was just sort of mildly humorous anecdotes with no connection or anything, and I just didn't really understand what this book's purpose was. What is this doing? So I wasn't really a fan. The next is another book by a comedian, and that is The Last Black Unicorn by Tiffany Haddish. Another one I listened to on audiobook, and she just did a really, really bad job narrating. I've never experienced an author reading their own book be so terrible, to be honest. It was, and she's an actress and a comedian, so it really surprised me how terrible her reading was. It was very stiff and awkward. And I'll be honest, I do not really enjoy her humor. It's just not my thing. But I found her story really interesting, and so I wanted to learn more about her, and it is talking about her life. And there were definitely some really interesting parts, but it was just, her humor wasn't for me, so that was already a strike against it. Her reading was terrible, and there were definitely some parts in there that made me a little bit uncomfortable. There was some stuff with particularly the disabled community and just the mentally handicapped, just the way that she was addressing some of the things. There were some things in there that I was really surprised that a sensitivity reader did not pick up on and be like, hey, maybe don't say it like this. So just wasn't really my thing. And then the final book that I did not really enjoy was another Pulitzer Prize winner, and that is The Confederacy of Dunces by John Kennedy Toole. This is supposed to be a satire. Everyone seemed to love it, and I was just not a fan. I didn't think it was funny. I thought that it was just very uninspired. The caricatures were, I mean, I get that that's the whole point of satire, that these are supposed to be exaggerated caricatures, but it just wasn't funny. It was just kind of like pathetic, and I was not a fan. So, anyways, that is my little wrap up of the past 3 months of reading. Like I said, I super enjoy reading. I read a lot, and yeah. If any of you guys have suggestions on books that I should definitely read, you should leave them down below. Let me know what your guys' favorite books have been recently. I know somebody recently on my last one suggested reading The Red Tent by Anita Diamante, and I actually just read that. It's technically in October, and I really enjoyed it. So if any of you guys have recs, I do look at them and add them to my list. So anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you are having a wonderful, wonderful day, and I will talk to you all soon in my next video. Bye.